Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Jared McCollum, and today I'm here with Ms. Mikchelle Traxel, our NDP candidate.
Hello, everyone.
For the Foothills riding here in Canada, Alberta, and yeah, she has just been approved.
Like an hour ago.
Okay, got all your signatures, everything in.
Yeah.
And now we officially have 3 candidates in our riding.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we're here today just to. I'm curious on your personal, platform and plan for this election and why you're running, and as well to ask a few questions. The one that I have with just about every politician, and I'm sure I share this with many people here. There's a few things that irk me about politicians, and so there's some questions I'm going to ask. So that if you're elected, we can always remind you of these things.
I think that's really good. Yeah, hold me accountable. That's what needs to happen.
Exactly. So first, this is all kind of last minute.
It is.
So why are you running as a candidate?
So I think, like a lot of Canadians, I was sitting and waiting for a candidate in my riding to be appointed. Mm-hmm. You know, we currently have John Barlow. He's our returning incumbent. He's been doing this for quite a long time. We have a maverick candidate who's a separatist, and I don't align with that ideology. Mm-hmm. I believe we have a Liberal that's been just recently appointed. I think there's still some stuff kind of going on with that candidate. And I was like, what about NDP? That's exactly where my ideology aligns, and there's no one in my riding. I remember past elections that we always kind of ended up with that last minute candidate, not necessarily someone from here.
Yeah, someone usually parachuted in from the university or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been some good showings with those people. I think they've been really good candidates. Unfortunately, they're just not good Foothills candidates. Mm-hmm. And I just kept waiting, and I just couldn't wait anymore. People kept sending the information about the NDP looking for someone for the Foothills, and it just became one of those moments of, okay, I'll do it. I'll make this happen. And so I put my name in Friday evening, and so it's just been this whirlwind of trying to get my signatures and get my vetting done, and get everything kind of together. And here we are now, Tuesday night, and it's confirmed, and I'm on the ballot, and yeah, it's been pretty wild. So,
and it's super cool. And those listening, I've been through this too. Mm-hmm. I ran back in 2008. Yes, 2008, federally for the Green Party. And it was a very interesting experience. It's hard work. It's a little stressful. It takes a lot of time, but it's a really interesting experience. And again, I did it for similar reasons. I felt we needed an option.
Yeah.
And I think too, again, probably a lot of those listening to this right now are thinking, whether you've always voted Conservative or you voted for other parties, I think all of us are starting to look for a little more change. Mm-hmm. And we're tired of politicians. We're tired of people not acting and actually getting stuff done. And, we're tired of people that just don't represent us and represent a party. Mm-hmm. So there's a few questions I want to ask you.
Definitely.
And we'll go through this really quick, these ones, and then we'll start talking about like party platform and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think these are things that people are important. So question number 1, and these ones you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but if you were elected, will you toe the NDP party line?
I think my goal as a politician is to remember the service piece of public service. My job, if I get this role, is to serve my public, which would be the Foothills MD, in the best possible way that I can. NDP is the platform and the voice, and I definitely share a lot of ideology, but if it's not in the best service of my constituents, it's not what I'm going to advocate for. I think it's very important to remember that your entire job is to represent the people who appointed you, and I think that's been a little amiss lately. Mm-hmm. I foresee myself obviously having moments where my riding and the ideology of the party might not line up, but I want to work effectively to find a solution and find forward momentum instead of just ignoring my community to follow the politics.
Yeah. And I hope too, like one thing, you know, John's done this several times where he's just voted without really considering how our riding would respond to something like that.
Yeah.
And just does it because that's what the party's telling him. But I would hope any politician, if they were going to vote against their riding, to at least explain to us, all right, I know you guys think this is the best idea, but this is why I feel I have to do this.
Yeah, I agree.
And I understand you're going to be angry at me and I'm going to upset some people, but I do believe long-term this is the right thing to do because it helps everyone or it's for some reason. But we don't get that. We don't get that honest communication and, keep it, holding themselves accountable to going against maybe what, and again, it's hard to determine the majority in a riding that's as big as ours.
Yeah.
But, if you're getting a lot of flack, to actually be really honest and not just,
yeah, I think that's
do
something
what you're told.
That's something that's incredibly important to me. I think that's the biggest thing for me is if you're going against your riding, explain to us why, explain to us what the circumstances are, and be transparent. And the lack of transparency in voting was a huge part of why I threw my name in. I felt that there was a lot of recent votes passed by John Barlow that didn't align with our community, and we saw a lot of pushback and we saw a lot of questioning. And we never really got clear and direct answers on those topics, and it became a lot of rhetoric and a lot of fluff and a lot of lower minority pandering. And I was really disappointed in that. And I won't be that person. That's not who I am at all.
Awesome. Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask, and then I'm sure everyone else here has a very similar feelings about this. When I watch the news and a politician is asked a question, they never directly answer the question.
Yeah, the circle talk.
Circle talk. And Jagmeet even does this sometimes. And I get you're a leader, but what I want to see is, and again, is just answer the fucking question. I'm sorry. And then explain around why. Okay, why you feel that way. But, and I think that's what turns us off from politicians is we watch that and they'll ask the question 3 times.
Yeah, and never actually
and
get
they
an
never
answer.
answer the question.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
I think the most important thing is to answer the question. I understand if there is a moment where I don't know the answer. I want to be able to say I don't know, but I'm going to find the answer for you and I'm going to find the solution. But I feel like most questions that are being posed, a well-prepared candidate can answer. A well-prepared candidate has enough facts around that specific topic that they can start to formulate a sentence and start to formulate an answer. And if there are pieces of that they don't know and they don't feel comfortable with, they can say, I know this, I know this, I know this. This is the direction that we're going. The ending piece is slightly out of focus at this point. Yeah. But once we go down this part of the journey, we will get this answer. Yeah. And I think that got lost, specifically with the Liberals and the Conservatives. The circle talk is just so loud and the rhetoric is so loud that they spend so much time kind of yelling at each other. They just forgot to answer the questions. And without answering the questions, they're not actually doing anything to benefit any of these communities. We're not finding solutions because we're just slinging mud. Yeah. And I'm over it.
Yeah. We see that a lot because recently CBC, they'll bring on candidates from each 3 main parties and they'll ask them a question and they don't answer and they spend the time blaming the other party and saying the terrible thing they did. Yeah. Again, rather than just answering the question. And I think in particular, Albertans, the reason why we like brash and honest politicians, like people always have like really, really fair and like positive memories of Ralph Kine.
Totally. I was thinking
they forget all the negative things he did.
Yeah, because he was a straight shooter.
Yeah, and that's what
he was known for.
Yeah, even though he was a jerk, and the same reason why some people like Trump. And we have few politicians from the other side that will just be honest and say their thing, even though it may irk some people or they might disagree with it.
Yeah.
And I do think that refreshing realness and honesty, we're craving it as a country.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And it's a huge part of why, I really respect Jagmeet Singh, and it's why I felt comfortable with the NDP, because he answers a lot of uncomfortable questions, and he's willing to kind of stick his neck out for all of us versus some of us.
Yeah.
And I was really tired of being represented by all of these candidates who only represent some of us and a lot of big business and don't have a plan forward and just get lost in the rhetoric. They're not bothering to remember the service piece of public service. They don't care about Canadians. They care about longevity within Parliament, and they've lost sight of what actually matters, and they're just completely disregarding answering the question.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. All right. Okay. One other thing is, and I think this is a pattern in politics that, again, irritates people, is when someone in opposition or from the other side automatically will always argue against any other ideas of another party, even though there may be some good ideas in it. Rarely we hear leaders saying, hey, I like that idea. These part of it I don't like, but I'm willing to support that. Let's meet. And there's less of that, less open discussion and honesty about that.
Yeah.
And one of the worst terms in politics is opposition. Because that just automatically decides that this party can no longer support anything.
Yeah.
Because their role is to be the opposition for the queen rather than, a politician whose job is to find consensus and improve the lives of all Canadians.
Correct.
So will you support good ideas and, talk about them and work with other parties?
Yeah, absolutely. I do that every day within my community. I work with a super diverse group of people from all ideologies, and have my entire working career. I've been within the food sector. I've been within the service sector. I own my own restaurant. Not one single person who walks through the door is exactly like another person. And I love being able to have that connection to all these different people and put that tapestry together and make something beautiful out of it. The only way that we will get out of our current situation is by working with each other and striving to move forward and striving to do what's best for as many of us as we possibly can. We are going to have conflict. We are going to have difference of opinion. But you're right. When the conversation completely stops just because we're from different parties, we're not solving a problem. We're not improving anything. We're not moving forward. We're just stifling it. And it just kind of kicks that idea around until it just goes away. Yeah. And then nothing has been solved. We have done nothing to improve the situation. And I'm not about that. I'm over it. It's a huge part of why I've finally decided to jump into politics, because I'm that person who's like, we got a 500-seat catering tonight. We got 6 servers who are missing. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this problem? Because this needs to be figured out because we have people seated at 6. Let's go, guys. Yeah. And I want to take that same approach to actually working with opposition, and again, that term, but working with different parliament representatives and moving forward. So
cool. Thank you. Now, the last on my little list here is, will you admit when you make mistakes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of being just human beings, and we can't improve unless we own our mistakes. And the double down of previous mistakes that I've seen in various parliament leaders from across Canada, that aggressive double down instead of just admitting where our shortcomings lay, admitting faults and striving to do better. We really lost that piece of humanity and humbleness. And it got lost in the rhetoric of big politics. Yeah. And it's really sad and unfortunate. And I just don't lean into that.
Well, and, I don't think we've ever had a government that hasn't been liberal or conservative. It's there may have been older parties, but as long as I can remember in my life, It's been one of the two. And they both follow the pattern of blaming the other or gaslighting us when they make mistakes.
Totally.
And, again, I gave Trudeau the benefit of the doubt. I do think he did some things better than Harper, but I think we can do even better.
I agree.
And I'm, I want a politician that can say, hey, yeah, I'm Justin Trudeau, and I have no clue about optics and, real world life because I grew up a little privileged and I don't realize the things I'm doing are wrong.
Fair.
And he just
Fair
keeps
assessment.
gaslighting us on it. And, we need politicians to stand up and say, gee, yeah, going on that vacation or handing, that contract over looks, not only does it look bad, it was wrong. I screwed up and I'm going to move forward.
I think there's been a real realization. So, for example, I skipped a lot of steps on my political ambitions. A lot of people within the community asked us to get involved with town politics, and I felt awkward about it. I own a business here in town. I've done very large caterings for the town. I've done large events in, connection with the town, and it felt weird to have a business that ingrained in that connection and then also be on town council. And I think there's a lot of politicians in higher levels of government who don't realize that their role in government needs to stay that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conflict of interest and there's a lot of short-sightedness. I think it's time for people who come from humble backgrounds, who work with people of all different wealth brackets, who have lived in different wealth brackets, can stand up and advocate for the majority. Because right now we do have a lot of very wealthy people or career politicians who don't know what it's like to have to go to the food bank, to have to pick between back to school clothes or food, who really have had a unique circumstance in life, or just average. We are not being represented fairly. We have people who are not within the same stratosphere as the rest of us, making decisions that directly impact all of us. And I think it's just time that somebody who can say, no, I can't live off $500 a month, stands up and points that out. And we start to normalize that conversation around income, around pay, around equality, around all of these topics that impact you and I. They determine if we can pay our cell phone bill, if we can buy a house, if we can do all of these things. And unless you've lived through that, I don't think you can fairly represent it because you don't grasp it. You don't understand the reality that a majority of Canadians are facing every single day.
And I think that is, it's definitely one of the top three things on the minds of people here in Foothills is, especially after the pandemic, we've all been beaten down by this virus and shut, not that we had we only had one real lockdown and it wasn't quite a full lockdown, but we've had a lot of restrictions and changes and it's made it difficult on businesses, on people.
The yo-yo effect has been harder in a lot of ways than
just a complete
lockdown.
Yeah.
And I talk with small businesses constantly. I talk with independent farms. I've heard their struggles. I know what they're going through. I relate to them. I know how hard it is when you have to call the bank and say, I can't make my mortgage payment because I lost $150,000 last year, $60,000, $10,000. The money, the number doesn't necessarily matter. It's the fact that you lost. It's the fact that you're suffering. It's the fact that you continue to have hardships and burdens that are unfair and completely out of your control. And there's not a lot of people listening and doing things to fix it. So
I think, along with that, it's that, affordable living in Canada is definitely one of the top three concerns. I think whether you've, done quite well here in Alberta with the oil booms, but things haven't been great for a long time here. Quite a number of years with oil dropping, and now the pandemic, and now, the investment from the federal government was limited. Thankfully, the NDP pushed things up to get, CERB a little higher, and to get unemployment higher, to get the loans to businesses better, all of that. But, then they hand over all this money to corporations that they just turned into, their own buying back stock or benefits to CEOs. I hope every Albertan is, and Canadian is kind of feeling this way. We're tired of, socialism for the rich and for corporations, and we're ready. We're struggling with cutthroat capitalism, and we're not getting the same supports.
It's not an equal playing field, and I've been saying that for a really, really long time. I know people who should have really easily qualified for help from the government who didn't. I'm one of them. I didn't lose enough money to qualify for any of the loans. And it's been super hard because of that. And isn't that ironic? I didn't lose enough, so therefore I can't access this, what was supposed to be federally backed, affordable financing. Instead, I'm being offered loans that are at 22% interest and amortized at 5 years. There's no physical way that I, as a small business, can actually hold that, can carry that debt. And that's across the board. That isn't special to me. That is a ton of money got given to big banks so that the day-to-day kind of operations of dealing with that money got pushed onto somebody else. We didn't even keep it within the Bank of Canada. We gave it to the Big Five, and we said, do your thing.
And that's the thing now. Scotiabank and the Bank of Montreal came out today, and they doubled their profits this year.
Yeah.
And how did they double their profits? Because the government decided, rather than us loaning this money to Canadians who gave us this money, we're going to loan you back our money, and we're the interest we make off of that,
it's astronomical,
will come back to us, to you, and we're just recycling the money with Canadians. No, we've decided to give those loans through these private banks so they make profit off everyone's misery.
Yep.
It is bonkers.
And it's not working. And it's not how you rebuild a struggling economy. I do truly believe that if we hadn't invested in CERB, if we didn't get money to small businesses, we would have seen a much worse economic outcome from the situation. But I do think we can do better. And I think right now is when we're starting to see where the shortcomings are. And right now is the time to fix it. And I think we need to have some tough conversations and really look at what we've done for the last 30 years, because this pandemic really exasperated a ton of problems that were already sitting there. There's a lot of people that I've talked to in higher levels of government who didn't even know what a merchant service loan was. They didn't know about small businesses not qualifying for loans. They were under the impression that if you walked into a bank with a business plan, you get all of your financing. You don't. That's just the way it is. You will find that one bank will give you $40,000, another bank will give you $20,000, maybe somebody else will give you $60,000, and then they'll give you really high interest credit cards. Well, your business needed $350,000 to get up and running. So you're bootstrapping the whole project with these hodgepodge of loans that all have different terms, that all have different interests, that all have different payment structures, plus all these high interest credit cards, and then you get up and running and you don't have any working cash flow. We've set it up so small business and innovation in Canada is based on if you're already wealthy, if you already have access to high volumes of cash, and it's just not working.
Well, and then, like these big, large corporations, whether it's WestJet, Air Canada, what's the one in Montreal that builds the planes? Every time these large companies, car makers, so on, banks, when they're failing because of their mistakes and their weaknesses and their bad planning, then they turn to the government and say, help us, or people are going to lose jobs. Well, rather than the government saying, that's fine, we're going to take care of these people, we're going to retrain them and give them funding and supports if you fail them. No, they give the money to the corporations. They turn around, take that money, give it to benefits, give it to their CEOs, give it to their shareholders.
Yeah. And
then they kept all those jobs anyway.
Yeah, and they moved the businesses out of Canada. And this cycle was something that we saw pre-pandemic. I think it's just something that's becoming more prevalent, and we've all seen it. We've all been living it. And I think we're all really tired of it. We're seeing a loss of innovation. We're seeing a loss of quality jobs. We're seeing people who should be living very easy lives of a happy middle-class Canadian at the food bank. You know, these are people who used to raise money for the food bank. And now, because of a series of events completely outside of their control, they're the ones who need to go to the food bank.
Yeah.
And there's been a real humbling moment for a lot of us. And I think right now is the time to rebuild from the bottom up, to make sure that all of us are doing well and not just this elite kind of crop on the top. I think it's really become beyond prevalent to remember that there is no economy unless we have people, and people do have power in this situation. And now's the time. Now's the time to make effective change that will improve everybody's lives.
Well, and it doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left.
Totally.
We're all suffering, and we're all getting screwed.
Yep.
And it's about time we decide that, okay, for the last 100 years, we've let these two parties try to figure it out, and they've just been making it worse and worse and worse. And they're not representing us. They're representing the money, and they're giving our money away to failing corporations and not taxing those that are making all the profit. You know, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are thinking, well, yeah, sure, I love the ideas of the NDP. You know, dental care, pharmacare, so drugs covered, it's part of healthcare. They want a universal basic income. They want more affordable housing, and to actually make some change so people can actually afford houses. These are all amazing things that I'm sure, doesn't matter you're on the left or the right, that deep down you support because you want those things for yourself. But how are we going to pay for it?
Tax the rich. That's the solution.
Who's the rich? Because I'm sure there's some guy sitting there thinking,
100%.
I'm rich. 100%. I don't want to pay more taxes.
We're talking about a very elite cream of the crop of Canadian earners who are well past whatever we will earn. We're talking millions of dollars annually. This isn't somebody who makes 130 grand on the rigs. This is well and above past that. And they have been getting away with essentially tax fraud for decades, and these big companies have been moving money illegally, and it's time for them to pay it back.
Well, do you remember the Panama Papers?
100%.
This was only a number of years ago, and it was in the news for about 30 seconds, and then everyone stopped talking about it. And
there's Canadians involved in
that. And these, again, like when you say you want to tax, like I don't know anyone in our riding that makes over, you know, who is worth over $100 million.
Yeah.
And if they are, I think they should be taxed a little bit. Because, again, I think for a while there, we used to believe this idea that the rich got rich by working hard and taking on great risk and everything like that. You know, I have a close friend.
We've talked about this.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
But he also understands that, yes, he had to take the risk to start. But who makes the money now? It's not him. It's his hundreds of employees.
Exactly.
And that's why he takes care of them so much.
Exactly.
But we need to realize this. So when we're talking about taxing the rich and making corporations actually pay taxes rather than getting away with it, but not paying them, that's our money.
Yeah, we gave them that money. We're entitled to that money, and it's time for it to come back. And I think previously we've seen a lot of political leaders who have been getting a lot from those large corporations. And I think it's time to really clean up politics and take that out of it. When you get elected to serve the people, you're not elected to serve the large corporation in your riding. You are elected to serve the people who work at that large corporation in your riding. And that's been forgotten. And it's time that we change that. There are absolutely incredible people within the community of Foothills who are salt of the earth, hardworking, absolutely exceptional human beings who've been forgotten, completely forgotten. We even lost a good amount of them to COVID because we just let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we're over it. We're all collectively over it. And it's time for accountability, and it's time for forward momentum, and it's time to be the Canada we want to be.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of money that needs to come back to Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the corporation's money. It's something that's been given to them without restriction, without limitation, without covenants of any kind and accountability. And it's just flowed. Mm-hmm. And we got to stop it.
Yeah.
Enough is enough.
Yeah. And again, you know, the people I'm concerned about most is those people that are working 2 minimum wage jobs.
Totally.
And still the working poor.
Yeah, can't make ends meet.
And housing in here in Okotoks.
It's astronomical.
It's so expensive. There's no affordable housing. There's no cheap rents.
It's even, it's predominant across the Foothills. You know, it used to be that if you moved into a rural community, you could afford a very affordable house. You might have to commute, but at least you would have a little bit of land. And now we're looking at $1 million for a 5-acre plot with a house on it. Well, and it's no longer affordable.
Yeah, rents in Okotoks are higher than Calgary now.
Yep.
Houses in Okotoks are higher when they used to be 10 to 15% cheaper.
Yep. Commercial leases are astronomical. They're completely off the charts.
Yeah.
And it's just not working. I really, truly feel like this is not a specific to Foothills problem. I feel like if we reached out to other smaller communities that are in really similar geographic states that we are, so, you know, those places just outside of Edmonton and kind of circling like up in Smoky Lake and all of that kind of stuff, I bet we would see the same inflation. I bet we would start to see the same series of problems. And wouldn't it be great if we all worked together to find a solution to all of these problems? But we're not. We're not doing any of that. We're bickering over some ridiculous Facebook conspiracy. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of political leaders using cannon fodder instead of actually saying what is going on. Something is happening to these communities. They're being taken advantage of. What is happening? Let's get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. And one last thing, because we want to keep this short, is we've noticed, so in our riding in particular, this summer, we've had drought. The farmers have not done very well. It's burning their crops in the field. It's been so hot and so dry. We're finally getting some rain, so there might be some respite for some of the crops.
A lot of the crops, though, are too far into their germination, and we're not going to see the growth that we need for them to actually be market ready.
Then we've got all the smoke that's been coming through. You know, so much of British Columbia is on fire. We're in an area where we're just going to see more and more extreme weather and more difficulties across the country. We're seeing it everywhere now. Whether you believe as an Albertan that climate change is caused by humans or not, that's not the discussion anymore. I think either of those, it doesn't matter. The question is, we're in trouble and we need to act. Whether you think it's just a natural occurrence, I'm totally fine with you believing that. But what are we going to do to stop this? And because if it's just a natural shift in weather, how long is this going to last? What's going to be the outcome? Either way, whether it's been caused by humans or not, we need to act and we need to prepare ourselves. We need to find ways to protect our water rather than selling it to Nestle for nothing. We need to find a way to protect ourselves from the forest fires and the floods that are going to be coming and all of these things. What do you think, as a government, we need to do about climate change?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to address it. And we need to stop bickering back and forth on whether it is real or not real or the nuances within that, and address the fact that Canada is in a climate crisis, flat out. And like you said, it really doesn't matter if you believe it's human, if you believe it's not human. I personally believe that we are a causality of it. I think there are a few corporations who are perpetuating it much faster than your average.
Is it 10?
Yeah.
10 corporations on this planet that are causing what is the percent?
I think it's about 70.
70%
Yeah.
of all the carbon is from 10 companies.
And I think we don't have time to bicker about the minutia of this any longer. We have farms that are going to go bankrupt after servicing our community for 100 years, because this isn't the first year that they've struggled. Mm-hmm. They've been struggling for the last 7 years. There hasn't been great turnouts in any industries that I personally know, and they've all experienced challenges. That being said, we also have some absolutely exceptional innovators within the agricultural community, specifically in the foothills. We're seeing super advanced hydroponic, aquaponic, greenhouse setups that are ridiculously affordable. They're so unbelievably simplistic. They're not reliant on a secondary energy source. So they don't need a ton of grow lights because it's just a greenhouse and we live in the sunniest place imaginable. So they figured out a way to kind of work our weather against itself and really effectively grow year round. We've seen super well structured direct to soil greenhouses that are growing the most beautiful tomatoes you've ever seen 11 months out of the year. They're having to vent their greenhouse in January, meaning the greenhouse is getting so warm that they have to exit some heat. We have that. We have that skill set. We have absolutely incredible communities who are working together, who are forming collectives so they can sell to restaurants. Mm-hmm. They're really struggling to get into grocery stores because of the red tape and the litigation around all of that. But COVID really did help us because a lot of that got eliminated and a lot of big companies said, here's all the labeling data that you need. Get to market. We see this massive shortage. How can we help? So private sector is ready. Private sector wants to see Canadian farms and Canadian products in grocery. They're ready to do this for us. We just have to figure out a way to cushion it.
Yeah. And just like we talk about how we want to transition oil workers to renewable energy jobs and to pay for them to be trained and pay for them to be, transition through that. Yep. We need to see that for farmers.
We do.
We're going to transform your farms to modern approaches and no longer make farmers, slaves to the seed companies or to the fertilizer companies or to the...
I'm so tired. I'm so unbelievably tired of the middleman within our cattle industry, within all of our agricultural products who are buying something from a farmer for 25 cents, putting it in a bag, charging a distributor $4.50 for it. The distributor's putting it in the grocery store for $5. Yeah. So the grocer isn't making any money, the farmer isn't making any money, and that middle guy who figured out how to just clunk the system along is making all of the money. Yeah. There is a lot of opportunity. Yeah. We also have seen huge growth within our filming industry, specifically in the foothills. There's been some absolutely insane filming happening out in High River, kind of all around Kananaskis, various different places in the foothills. And that's an $800 million injection into the provincial economy that could potentially be $1 billion. And, if we can't use this land for growing, maybe we can use this land for filming. Yeah. Maybe this is a way that we can help these farmers shoulder this time of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And we can make a plan.
Yeah. Or pay the farmers to turn their farms into carbon sinks with prairie grasses.
Maybe.
And pay them to do that.
I think that there is a lot of opportunity that really needs to be evaluated. And I think we just have to have some tough conversations and we need to stop playing bureaucracy. Yeah. We need to find a solution because at the end of the day, Farmer Greg isn't able to pay his mortgage and his taxes are behind and he can't afford any labor or anything, any seed, any fertilizer, any nothing to get next year's crop in the ground. He can't even deal with this year's crop because If he lights it all on fire, it's going to go out of control. He's super stressed out. And then a bank's calling him saying you're behind on your mortgage, and if you don't make payments, we're going to foreclose on your property.
Well, and I think any conservative would agree to say that we need less red tape.
Yeah.
And, Jagmeet said that several times. There's a lot of things that we're doing in our country that are making profit for middlemen and corporations and other people with a little bit of power, rather than changing the laws and changing the red tape so the people that are actually doing the work get paid and get rewarded for that hard work.
And there is something to be said about, when we buy Alberta products, when we support Alberta initiatives, that money does stay in our community. So if I'm buying a pepper from an Alberta farmer and I'm spending that money, 99 cents of it is going back into this local economy, and we start to see movement forward and we start to see recovery. When we start to have these middle corporations that are pulling 80 cents of that dollar out of the community before I've even purchased it, that's not solution. That's really bad business, and that's why we're seeing kind of this widespread ghost community happening where people really can't afford the old way of life. They can't support their family with a farm. They can't support their family with agriculture or small business or even medium business. Nothing is working. We're all seeing the same series of problems, and we need solutions. We all collectively need solutions. Less rhetoric, more solutions.
People over profits.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know I said that was the last thing, but one more thing I want to say, okay, that I'm going to ask you about. I heard this the other day on the internet, and it was this fellow explaining the story. And he's like, okay, let's say my great-grandfather punched your great-grandfather in the face.
Okay.
Then the next generation, my grandfather punches your grandfather in the face.
Okay.
Then the next generation, my dad punches your dad in the face. Okay. How are you going to feel around me?
Not great.
Do you think I owe it to you to at least say, I'm not going to punch you in the face? I know my ancestors have punched you in the face every generation, but I just want you to know that I'm not going to punch you in the face. And, I feel that we can do some things to make up for that.
Yes.
And I felt that was a good explanation on how we need to, approach, whether it's, the history we've done in this country, whether it was with the Japanese or with Black people or the First Nations or whatever. Time and time again, everyone say, well, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. Well, yes, that maybe you haven't done anything racist, but our history is full of it, and we need to make up for it. And we need to show these people that we care and we're no longer going to hurt them. And we actually have to, provide them with water, health care, autonomy over their land and their rights that we promised to them over 100 years ago. What do you feel we need to do? How do we start? What kind of action do you want to see to, some justice for First Nations and for people of color?
So I think first and foremost, it even ties to the climate discussion we just had, is accountability, is admitting that there's a problem, admitting that there's a history, and taking ownership of that history instead of constantly pushing it aside and minimizing it. So I'll speak specifically to the Indigenous community. I think I have a very long history with the Indigenous community. I did a lot of outreach in Vancouver when I lived on the Lower East Side. I worked right on Main and Hastings. I saw a lot. I saw a lot of what that continuous punch in the face becomes. And we have a lot to make up for. And we are sitting in this moment in time where we are uncovering bodies of children, and we need to take ownership of that. I don't have a perfect solution for it, but I want to sit down and I want to listen, and I want to find the right answers to move forward that are respectful to the Indigenous community, that aren't just a Band-Aid solution, aren't just a couple $1 million and a oopsie daisy. I think we really do need effective accountability. And like you said, water and human rights and land autonomy and things that were already supposed to have happened long before you and I existed. I think that's a really good place to start. And I think that that is applicable to a lot of different social groups within our country, even the queer community. It's something that we've made mistakes in the past. It's time to take accountability for those mistakes, to listen to those communities and see how we can best service those communities.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was an interview with Jagmeet Singh, and a reporter asked him, okay, so you want to fix the water for the natives. How are you going to pay for it? Mm-hmm. And he's like, why are you asking me that question?
Yeah. Yeah.
If it were a white community in Ontario,
Yep.
or PEI or British Columbia, would you be asking me where I'm going to get the money from?
Yeah.
You would not ask these questions.
Yep.
It would be, yeah, we're going to help that community.
Yeah.
Oh, there was flooding in Calgary. Yeah, we're going to get them the money. We're going to get it done, and we're going to get it fixed. But when it comes to the North and First Nation communities, it's this, oh, well, out of sight, out of mind. Do we really want to pay for that?
And it's really interesting you brought up Northern Canada as well, because during the pandemic, I own a restaurant. I'm super involved with the movement of food across Canada. It's something that interests me. And I was able to sit in on a Zoom discussion with the owner of Cisco. And during the course of the pandemic, the Canadian government wasn't sending food to northern communities. They were not getting the supplies that they need. They were one of the last on the lines. And Cisco, within the course of 48 hours, found a way to get food to those communities. And how they did it was by talking to those communities and finding a solution to meet in the middle. And they were able to regularly provide food. They were able to decrease the cost of the food that went to those communities.
Which is super expensive usually.
Insanely expensive. And all it took was a conversation. And it was so amazing to me that this problem that has just been passed down from all of us. I remember being told in school, it's just that way. That's just the way it is. We can't get food up there. It's super inconvenient. And this solution came to pass in 48 hours because of a conversation. Yeah. And it's really quite amazing what happens when you sit down and you actually talk to the community that's being impacted and say, what is it that you need? We live in a landlocked province, and yet most of us have access to water. We live in a rural community where most of the houses around us aren't connected to town water. They have aquifers. They have access to a well on their own land. You cannot tell me that this problem of clean, accessible drinking water is as complex as we're being made out to believe that it actually is.
Yeah.
There has to be water. There has to be.
Yeah.
It is
of course
a solvable problem.
And they have some of it's some of the cleanest, pristine areas in Canada, but we just won't take the time and money and work with them to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Because, and
we need some cisterns. We need a good well dig.
Yeah.
We need some purification. And this is a solvable problem. Yeah. And all it's going to take is a conversation and just listen. And no more photo ops. No more BS. Let's actually get crews on the ground. Let's do it.
And that's something I'm, excited. I know Jagmeet Singh says that, as soon as he's elected, it's like day one.
Yeah.
We're going to get up there and get it done.
Yeah.
And
up there is a really relative term because this is a broad problem across Canada. This isn't like, oh, we have one or two. This is 100 plus that we need to address immediately.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I think for me, the NDP, all of their platform makes sense, whether it's climate, whether it's economy, whether it's everything. But the thing that finally pushed me over the edge was something as simplistic as capping cell phones and making sure that we have internet access and making sure that we can afford it. And I'm the person who pays our bills in our house. And I was thinking to myself, my husband and I, we share a cell phone plan. We pay $200+ a month. Sometimes we go over data because we do use our phones for work. And then all of a sudden it's a $300 bill. If we are able to cap cell phones and I'm able to save $150 a month, all of that money that I'm saving, I will use within my community. I might put some of it in the bank so I'm not afraid of the check engine light on my vehicle turning on.
Yeah.
But most of that money is going to go to local farms, local grocery stores, local boutiques, local restaurants. And that really tiny little shift that should have happened a decade ago is going to pour money back into our economy so much faster than some coupon. And that's where I landed.
And that's why we need a complete shift.
Yeah.
We don't need conservatives running things. We don't need liberals running things. We need a totally new party that it doesn't have any, big business or corporation or, has their claws in them so that they're like, well, I really want to do this, but I don't want to upset them. And okay, how can we do this slowly? Or how can I do it just apart? Or how can I distract everyone until they forget about it and we can just move on to something else? We need someone who's not afraid to piss off a lot of people with money and to start giving that money back to Canadians.
Yep.
And I think Jagmeet's the guy to do it.
Yeah.
And I really hope as Canadians that we can get past, making two bad choices continually. And I do think this is finally, and I do think there's a lot of Canadians that want to vote NDP. That, there's those on the right that don't realize that they share a lot of the same things the NDP did. Yeah. And if they did vote Compass on the CBC website, totally. They'd realize they're actually very left and not right. And then there's a bunch of the liberals or the Greens that, support these parties, or especially support the liberals thinking that, oh, well, this is I got to vote liberal to vote strategically so the conservatives don't get in. This is not that election to vote strategically.
It's been really interesting as well because I was trying to collect signatures for my ticket, et cetera, et cetera. I was getting contacted by family members saying, can you please go visit my mother-in-law? Can you please go visit my father-in-law? These people were in their 80s and they wanted specifically to sign my ticket and to tell me that for the first time in 60 years, they're voting NDP.
Wow.
And it's because the NDP actually cares about seniors' rights. They care about the for-profit structure that we have allowed to just absolutely infiltrate our senior care. They're so fed up and they're so sick of watching this repetitive cycle over and over again, and they want change. They want change. This isn't a millennial thing. This isn't a, Gen Z thing. This isn't generational. This is Canadians are mad and they want accountability and they want change from all generations. Yeah. So.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
If you're interested in supporting Mikchelle, one, I'm sure by the time we get this thing up, there may be some information on where you can support her, wherever this is going to be shared throughout the campaign, and maybe throw a little bit of money, whether that's $20, seriously, $20 will make a big difference in this campaign. The incumbent spent $60,000 last election or something like that. Yeah. So we don't need a lot, but some will help. And I know too that, this is going to be a bit different campaign because you can't necessarily go door to door and all of that.
Incredibly short.
So we're going to have to rely on others to actually talk to their friends and family and say, let's do something different.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going to happen because either way, I'm pretty sure we're probably in a minority government anyway, but it would sure be nice to have a hell of a lot more NDP people on there to stand up for Canadians and actually push for some change.
Push for some change. I'm so tired of families being torn apart by this. I want effective change and I want forward momentum because, we can share a difference of opinion on a few topics, but the basics of human rights, we generally all agree on. Yeah. And if you don't, we probably have a different series of conversation that we need to have, but we can all agree that everybody needs water. Everybody needs healthcare. I would love to see everybody be able to go to the dentist, and I want to lift everybody up. This isn't pie. It's not limited slices for everybody. It's time for all of us to collectively get lifted up. Yeah. So
Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you.
And, whatever happens, I know your voice is going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Have an awesome day.